I remember the exact moment my world cracked open. It was a Friday evening, September 14th, 2018, in downtown Chicago, and the sun had just started to dip below the skyline, casting this golden-orange hue across the streets that somehow made everything feel calm, almost cinematic. I was sitting at a small corner table at this cafe called Bean Brew, my laptop open, headphones on, pretending to work, but mostly scrolling through my phone. I could hear the chatter around me, the barista calling out names for orders, the clinking of mugs, the occasional hiss of the espresso machine, but none of it really registered because I was waiting for her. Her name was Melissa. Everyone called her Mel, but I always used her full name in my head when I was upset with her, made the anger sharper, more precise, like I was aiming at a target. I'd known Mel for almost 5 years by then. We met back in college at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, during sophomore year. I had been awkwardly trying to find a group to sit with in the cafeteria when she walked in, radiant in this effortless way, with this laugh that made everyone notice. I remember thinking, there's no way someone like her could ever notice someone like me. But she did. Somehow, she did. Back then, life felt simple. I was a computer science major who spent most of his time coding and watching Marvel movies, while she was studying marketing and organizing these insanely elaborate social events that everyone raved about on Instagram. We were polar opposites in almost every way, but somehow it worked. She was loud, chaotic, and magnetic. I was quiet, calculating, and cautious. Together, we became this weird kind of balance me, anchoring her when she got carried away, and her pulling me out of my comfort zone when I needed it most. By 2018, we'd moved in together in this tiny apartment in Logan Square. It was the kind of place with creaky wooden floors, a small balcony overlooking a graffiti-covered alley, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of old takeout boxes even when we cleaned. I loved that apartment. It felt like ours, a place where we'd survived late-night arguments about bills, celebrated small victories like my first job promotion, and even endured our first real fight over something dumb, like whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. I'd always trusted her. Hell, I'd loved her in ways I didn't even fully understand at the time. I wasn't naive. I'd seen enough of the world to know people can be complicated, messy, even cruel, but with Mel, I'd thought I was safe. I thought love could protect me from all that. That Friday evening, I had invited a few friends over after work. Just a casual thing: James, my coworker from the tech startup, and a couple of guys I'd met through board game nights. Nothing fancy. I wanted her there because I knew she'd make the evening fun. But as I sat there, twirling a pen between my fingers, I noticed she was running late. Not just late, her text said she'd be here by 6, and it was already 6:45. I tried not to overthink it. Maybe she got held up at work. Maybe traffic was bad. I kept telling myself these things, but there was this pit in my stomach, this gnawing sense of unease that wouldn't go away. I can still feel it, the tension in my chest, the way my fingers tapped against the wood like they were trying to drum out the anxiety. When she finally walked in, I noticed immediately that something was off. She wasn't her usual bubbly self. She had that distracted, almost cold look in her eyes, like she was hiding something. I remember the way the light from the cafe hit her face, and I could see the faint shadow under her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Normally, I'd tease her about staying up too late watching reality TV or scrolling through TikTok. But this time, it didn't feel funny. It felt heavy, like there was a storm brewing behind that forced smile. We exchanged the usual greetings. Small jokes, laughter forced through the tension, but my instincts were screaming at me. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the way she kept checking her phone, how her eyes would dart to the screen every few minutes, her laughter never quite reaching them. I tried to shake it off, tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid the night started casually. We ordered pizza, poured some wine, and tried to relax. But then came the moment that would haunt me forever. We were sitting around the living room, music playing softly in the background, when one of my friends, James, made a joke about dating apps. It was harmless, just a laugh, but the way Mel reacted, I'll never forget it. She laughed, yes, but not at the joke. She laughed at me, and not just laughed, she mocked me in front of my friends. In this way that cut so deep, I could feel it physically. At first, I thought I misheard. Maybe I imagined it. But then she said it again, louder, with that sharp, cutting edge that left no room for doubt. My friends froze, and I could feel their eyes on me, trying to gauge my reaction. And in that moment, something inside me shattered. The warmth, the trust, the years of love, they all felt like they evaporated into thin air. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. I forced a laugh, the kind of laugh that sounds like glass breaking, brittle, and hollow. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to rip the mask off whatever game she was playing, but I didn't. I didn't because part of me still clung to hope. Stupid hope that this was some weird, cruel misunderstanding. The night ended awkwardly. My friends left, sensing the tension, leaving me alone with this gnawing, cold dread. We didn't speak on the way home. The silence was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I remember walking behind her, feeling the weight of every step, every quiet car passing by, every distant siren wailing like the world was mourning me. When we finally got home, the apartment felt different. The walls that had once held laughter now seemed to close in, suffocating. I tried to talk to her, gently, trying to probe, trying to understand what had happened, but she deflected, smiled, laughed it off, and said something about me overreacting. Overreacting, that word burned into me, lodged itself into my chest, and I couldn't shake it. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside, and replayed every interaction we'd ever had. I remembered little things, the way she'd check her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, the fleeting glances that didn't meet my eyes, the sudden secrecy about social plans she'd never had before. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things, that love makes you paranoid sometimes. But deep down, I knew. Deep down, something was wrong, and my heart, that naive little heart, was beginning to see the cracks in the person I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. It's strange. Looking back now, I can still feel that tight knot in my stomach, that simmering tension, that sense that life was about to throw me into chaos I wasn't ready for. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. And when it did, the world I'd built with Melfa love, the trust, the laughter was going to crumble in ways I never could have imagined. And yet, somehow, even in that first night of cold realization, there was a small spark of clarity, a whisper in my mind telling me, maybe you deserve better. Maybe life has a way of balancing the scales. I didn't know it then, but karma has a way of showing up when you least expect it, and the seeds of what she had sown that night were about to grow into something she could never undo. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but my mind refused. Images flashed, smiles that weren't genuine, touches that felt hollow, laughter that had been masking something darker. I realized that my life, as I knew it, was on the edge of a cliff, and the fall was inevitable. That night, September 14th, 2018, was the first real taste of betrayal, and I had no idea it was only the beginning. The days that followed September 14th were like walking through a fog I couldn't shake. I went to work. I laughed at dumb office jokes. I coded late into the night. But nothing penetrated that thick, gnawing tension lodged deep inside me. Mel didn't seem any different, at least on the surface. She smiled, made coffee in the morning just like she always did, and dropped those little "I love us" like breadcrumbs along a path that led nowhere. But I was starting to notice patterns I'd ignored before, little inconsistencies, tiny fractures in her story that no one else would see. It all came to a head on a Tuesday evening, October 2nd, 2018. I was at home earlier than usual, working on a presentation for a client at the startup. The apartment smelled faintly of baked bread. Mel had been experimenting with sourdough, a gandon. The faint hum of indie music drifted from the living room. I wasn't paying much attention until I noticed her phone vibrate on the kitchen counter. She wasn't looking, didn't even reach for it, and I don't know why, but I felt this surge of suspicion. I picked it up. I know, it's invasive, it's wrong, but the little voice in my chest, the one I'd been trying to silence for weeks, wouldn't let me ignore it. And that's when I saw it. A message from someone saved in her contacts. As Babe I froze, the screen lit up her last text. "Can't wait to see you tonight." The world tilted. I could feel my stomach drop into a pit I didn't know existed, my heart thumping so violently I could hear it in my ears. Every memory, every laugh, every touch, suddenly twisted into something I hadn't wanted to see. She had been lying to me. About where she was, about what she was doing, about who she was with. I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, watching that little text over and over again, tracing every word, every emoji, every implication. I thought about the nights I'd waited for her, the weekends I'd planned around her schedule, the trust I'd poured into her without hesitation. All of it. Betrayal. I felt like my chest had been hollowed out, my insides scraped clean by a slow, methodical knife. When she finally walked into the living room, humming a song I didn't recognize, I tried to keep my composure. I asked casually, "How was your day?" She smiled, shrugged, and said it was fine. And I realized that she had no idea I knew, not yet, and that, somehow, made it worse. The pretense, the act, the sheer casualness of it was a slap in the face. I couldn't stop myself from thinking back over the past few months. The late nights at work, the sudden excuses for why she couldn't join friends for dinner, the unexplained texts, the subtle defensiveness whenever I tried to ask about her day. All the little things I'd brushed off as normal, as quirks. As harmless patterns now, they felt like breadcrumbs leading me to a truth. I hadn't wanted to face it. It all came to a breaking point 2 weeks later, October 16th, at a friend's birthday party. It was at this rooftop bar in River North, the kind with twinkling fairy lights strung across exposed beams and a view of the Chicago River that made everything feel cinematic and surreal. I had invited Mel, of course, and she'd agreed to come, but the moment we arrived, I noticed something that made my stomach drop like ice water. She wasn't alone. There was a man with her, someone I'd never met before. Not just standing with her casually, no. They were leaning close, laughing in a way that made my blood run cold. And then it clicked. The way she had looked at him, the casual touch on his arm. The way her laughter carried differently around him, it all made sense. The texts, the late nights, the evasive behavior, all of it. I froze, standing on the edge of the crowd, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things. Maybe I was seeing shadows where there were none. But then she caught my eye. Not the warm, teasing glance I was used to, but this flicker of guilt or maybe arrogance, I couldn't tell, which immediately sent a jolt through me. I felt my chest tighten, my hands clench, and suddenly the room felt unbearably small, like everyone around me was watching me crumble. I wanted to confront her right there, in front of everyone, to shout and demand explanations. But I couldn't. Something inside me told me to wait, to hold on to the shred of dignity I still had. Instead, I retreated to a corner, nursing a drink, pretending I was fine, while my mind replayed every memory of us together. The good ones, the bad ones, the ones that suddenly felt like lies. Later that night, after the party had dispersed and the city lights blurred into a dizzying haze, we got into a fight that I can't even fully describe without feeling it all over again. I accused her, gently at first, then with rising panic, until my voice was shaking and tears were stinging my eyes. She denied it, of course. Overreacting, she said. Paranoid, crazy, the usual lines I'd heard before, but this time they landed differently. I knew. I stayed up all night that night, scrolling through her messages, trying to trace every step, every lie, every betrayal. And the more I uncovered, the worse it got. There were months of deception, subtle manipulations, small humiliations that had felt like accidents at the time, but were now part of a pattern so cruel it made my head spin. The realization hit me like a freight train. I had been humiliated, manipulated, and used, not just in private, but in front of friends, in front of the world, in a way that left scars deeper than I could have imagined. That night, lying in the dark, listening to the distant hum of the city, I made a decision. Not a fully formed plan yet, but a promise to myself. I would not let this break me. I wouldn't disappear quietly into the shadows of shame or betrayal. I needed answers, and more than that, I needed some form of reckoning. It was terrifying, because I'd never imagined myself in this position. I had never been the person seeking revenge, the person fueled by anger and heartbreak. I had always been the quiet one, the patient one, the one who forgave to ice. But something inside me had shifted irrevocably. The version of me that had trusted blindly, that had laughed at her jokes, that had loved without question, that person was gone. And so the breaking point was not just about betrayal. It was about awakening. About realizing that life isn't fair, people aren't always who they seem. And the world can be brutal in ways that love sometimes can't shield you from. That night, I swore silently, my fists clenched under the blankets, that karma would find its way. I didn't know when or how, but the idea that someone who humiliated me so publicly, so deeply, could walk away unscathed was something I couldn't accept by the next morning. I was exhausted, hollowed out, but strangely alive. The anger had woken something dormant inside me, a sense of clarity, focus, and a quiet rage that would guide my next steps. Little did I know then that this was only the beginning, that the fallout of that betrayal would ripple through every part of my life, challenging everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and myself. The days after that party were a blur of numbness and quiet devastation. It wasn't like a sudden explosion of anger or confrontation, more like a slow leak of everything I thought I knew about my life, dripping steadily until I was standing in a puddle of betrayal. Walking into the office every morning felt surreal. I'd stare at my reflection in the glass walls of the startup, seeing my own tired eyes, the hollow set of my jaw, and wonder how someone could look so alive on the outside while their heart felt like it had been hollowed out. Mel didn't make it easy. She moved through the apartment like a ghost of normalcy, humming songs she used to sing to me, lighting candles in the kitchen, making coffee just the way I liked it. But every act felt like a knife. Every gesture, every casual smile, every "I love you" was tainted now. I'd hear her laughter on the phone sometimes, muffled by the walls, and my stomach would drop because I knew it wasn't for me. It was for him. That other man who had been infiltrating our lives, eroding the foundation I had built with her over years. I started noticing the little things more vividly. Her phone, always subtly angled away. The scent of a perfume I didn't recognize, lingering faintly on her clothes. A hair on the pillow that wasn't mine. I became obsessive, scrutinizing every text, every social media interaction, every seemingly innocent comment. Friends noticed the change in me, too. James asked if I was okay at work, and I forced a smile, lied that it was just stress, just deadlines, just life. No one knew the storm raging inside me, and honestly, I didn't want them to. This was mine to endure. Family didn't help. My younger sister, who I'd always confided in, tried to offer advice, but she didn't get it. She said things like, maybe she's just going through something, or relationships have ups and downs, as if 5 years of trust and love could just be downs in a graph that would eventually stabilize. It hurt because she didn't see it the way I did. She didn't see the humiliation, the betrayal, the slow burn of my dignity being chipped away, bit by bit. By someone I had once considered my world, work became a refuge, but also a pressure cooker. I threw myself into coding, into presentations, into projects, trying to distract myself, trying to find some sense of accomplishment that didn't involve the mess my personal life had become. But every time my phone vibrated, or I saw a notification pop up with her name, I felt a jolt of panic. Sleep became a luxury. Nights were the worst, lying in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside, pretending not to notice the weight of her presence. The betrayal so close, it was almost tangible. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. It was October 30th, 2018, and I had spent the entire evening tracing her messages again, cataloging inconsistencies, confirming suspicions I didn't want to face. I felt hollow, raw, and something inside me snapped. I left the apartment for a walk in the chilly autumn air, the wind biting at my cheeks as I wandered aimlessly through Logan Square. The streets were almost deserted, and the faint smell of fallen leaves mixed with the lingering aroma of pizza from nearby takeout shops. I remember thinking how cruel life could be, how unfair, how someone you trust could turn your entire world upside down without even flinching. I ran into an old friend, Claire, at a small corner bookstore. We hadn't seen each other in years, and she noticed the tension immediately. Her eyes scanned my face, landing on the tight line of my lips, the dark circles under my eyes, the way I seemed to move as though the ground beneath me had disappeared. She asked if I was okay, and for the first time, I let some of it out. Not everything, never. Everything but enough to feel a slight release. She reminded me that I deserved better, that no one should humiliate the people who love them most, that karma, in one form or another, has a way of evening the scales. But coming home was worse. The apartment felt like a trap, every corner echoing memories that had become tainted. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that I had been living with someone who had humiliated me not just in private, but in front of friends, manipulating perceptions, controlling narratives, and feeding on my trust like a parasite. My mind went back to that rooftop party, the way she had laughed, the way my friends had glanced at me, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. That humiliation gnawed at me more than the betrayal itself. I started avoiding friends, too. I didn't want to explain, didn't want to answer questions about her absence, her presence, or her actions. Every encounter felt like a reminder that my life was unraveling. The social world, once a source of joy, became a mirror reflecting my failure to see through her mask. I could feel the tension building inside me like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. By November, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and caught in this loop of despair and anger. My diet slipped, my sleep became erratic, and I noticed myself snapping at small things: meals, coworkers, minor inconveniences. It was the invisible scars of humiliation and betrayal, eating away at the edges of who I was. I even started questioning myself, wondering if I had misread signs, if I had somehow failed to notice her pain or needs, if the problem was me. The internal dialogue was relentless. You should have seen it. You're too trusting. Maybe you deserved this. Then came the confrontation that changed everything. I found out from a mutual friend, someone I thought I could trust, that she had been openly bragging about the situation to people we both knew. The humiliation wasn't private. It wasn't discreet. She had been creating a narrative that painted me as obsessive, paranoid, irrational, a laughingstock in our social circle. I felt like the floor had collapsed beneath me, and all the air had been sucked out of the room. Every ounce of shame, anger, and heartbreak collided into one overwhelming wave. For days, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I barely spoke to anyone. Work was mechanical, an autopilot keeping me alive while my mind replayed every moment, every betrayal, every subtle hint I had ignored. I walked through the city like a ghost, haunted by memories, carrying a weight that no one else could see. But that everyone seemed to sense. It was during this time that I started thinking differently. I realized I couldn't stay in the same environment. Couldn't continue letting her live rent-free in my life while she mocked me in private and public alike. I needed space, clarity, and, more than anything, a way to reclaim myself. That was the beginning of my transformation, not yet action, but the first spark of a plan, a quiet resolve building from the ashes of humiliation and heartbreak. The fallout was complete. My social life, my peace of mind, my sense of self-all had been decimated by someone I thought I knew completely. But in that devastation, a strange clarity emerged. I realized that if I didn't act, if I didn't take control of my own story, I would be a casualty of her manipulation forever. And so, with exhaustion in my bones and a cold fire in my chest, I began to think about how to turn the tables. Not recklessly, not vindictively, but decisively. Because humiliation, when wielded against you, can either break you or fuel you. I chose the latter. After months of sleepless nights, replaying every cruel laugh, every sly text, every moment that had chipped away at my dignity, I realized that I couldn't just sit in the wreckage of my own heartbreak anymore. Something had shifted inside me. The humiliation, the betrayal, the exhaustion, they weren't just scars. They were fuel, a quiet, simmering fire that demanded action. Not out of vengeance for its own sake, but to reclaim myself, my narrative, my life. I started small. I needed distance from her, from the apartment that had been our home, from the ghost of the man I had trusted more than anyone in the world. On a cold November morning, I packed my things. Not dramatically, not in some cinematic rage, but with a calm, deliberate focus I hadn't felt in months. The boxers felt heavy in my hands, but lighter somehow in spirit. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a sense of purpose. I was taking control. I moved into a small studio in Wicker Park, just enough space for me and my thoughts. It was cozy, sparse, but mine. The floors were bare, except for a small rug I'd brought from the old apartment. And the walls were empty except for a single framed photo of Lake Michigan at sunset, something I'd taken during a summer trip. A reminder that life still held beauty even in the chaos. That evening, I poured a glass of whiskey, sat on the edge of the bed, and let myself breathe. I felt something I hadn't in months. Clarity. I began documenting everything. Not in some obsessive, paranoid way, but to reclaim truth. I collected texts, screenshots, social media posts, and even mutual friends' accounts. Every lie she had told, every public humiliation she had inflicted, every subtle act of betrayal, it was all there, meticulously catalogued. Each piece of evidence wasn't just a record. It was a key to understanding the depth of her deception and the foundation for the next steps I needed to take. And then, slowly, I began rebuilding myself. Work became more than a refuge, it became a platform. I threw myself into projects at the startup with a focus I hadn't known I was capable of. I started networking again, reconnecting with friends I had avoided out of shame, and gradually allowing myself to laugh, to feel, to engage with the world outside the apartment that had been both sanctuary and prison. But the real turning point came one rainy Thursday evening. December 13th, 2018, I was scrolling through social media, half distracted, when I noticed a post from a mutual friend. It was a photograph from a holiday gathering a week earlier. And there she was, Malika, smiling, leaning into him, the man who had humiliated me. In front of a group of people I recognized, but there was something off. The caption read, "Finally feeling appreciated." A few of the people she considered allies were subtly mocking her, joking about how obvious her lies had been. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. And then a thought occurred to me: karma doesn't always come in a dramatic, cinematic explosion. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's slow, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. People see the truth, even when the lies are carefully constructed. And that night, I realized that my best revenge wouldn't be shouting, exposing, or retaliating with malice. It would be living, thriving, letting her actions crumble under their own weight while I rebuilt everything she had tried to destroy. I began, small but strategic. I improved my social media presence, reconnecting with old friends, posting about projects, travels, experiences, all authentic, all part of a life she couldn't touch. I attended professional conferences, networked, and even started mentoring interns at work, gaining respect and recognition I hadn't pursued before. Every step was deliberate, a quiet declaration that I wasn't the broken, humiliated person she had assumed I would be. The final turning of the tables came unexpectedly. One evening in March 2019, I ran into a mutual friend, Laura, who had witnessed some of the subtle humiliation Melissa had inflicted over the years. Over coffee, she casually mentioned how some people in our social circle had started noticing inconsistencies in Melissa's stories, how rumors about her manipulations were quietly circulating, and how friends were distancing themselves. I didn't have to say a word. Karma, it seemed, had started its work. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and melancholy. This wasn't joy born of revenge, it was peace born of vindication. I didn't have to humiliate her, didn't have to confront her publicly, because the truth had a way of surfacing on its own. And in that moment, I realized something important. Reclaiming yourself, your dignity, and your life is infinitely more powerful than any act of retaliation. By summer 2019, I had a new apartment, a stronger social circle, a promotion at work, and a sense of self I hadn't realized I was capable of achieving. The old wounds still throbbed occasionally, reminders of the betrayal, but they were tempered by growth, by resilience, by the knowledge that I had survived and thrived despite it. I occasionally caught glimpses of her online, posts about her life, her travels, her new relationships. I didn't react emotionally anymore. Instead, I felt a quiet empathy for someone who had chosen deception and manipulation over honesty and integrity. It wasn't pity exactly, but an acknowledgement that people reveal themselves in ways you can't control, and sometimes life reveals the consequences of those choices without your interference. And through it all, I learned something profound. Humiliation can either destroy you or awaken you. Betrayal can either imprison you or liberate you. And love, when combined with discernment, can teach lessons you never expected to learn. The fire that had once consumed me had transformed into light, guiding me toward a life that was authentically mine, untainted by lies, unshackled from deceit. By the end of 2019, I had a sense of closure, not because Melissa had suffered spectacularly, but because I had regained everything she had tried to take from me: dignity and the freedom to live without fear of humiliation. I had turned the tables, not through malice or revenge, but through resilience, clarity, and unwavering focus on myself. And in that process, I discovered a version of me I hadn't known existed, a stronger, wiser, unbreakable version, forged in the fires of betrayal and sharpened by the quiet, inevitable justice that life delivers. By the start of 2020, life had finally begun to feel like mine again. The apartment in Wicker Park had become a sanctuary, a place where I could breathe, laugh, and even cry without fear of judgment or betrayal. I had redecorated in a way that felt completely authentic. Plants in the corners, a small bookshelf lined with novels I loved, framed photos of travels and moments I wanted to remember, not reminders of pain. Every detail was deliberate, a testament to the life I was reclaiming. The pandemic hit a few months later, and oddly enough, it was another kind of blessing. Work transitions to remote, giving me even more space to focus on personal growth. I started journaling consistently, documenting thoughts, experiences, and reflections that I had suppressed for years. Writing became a tool for clarity, for processing not just what Melissa had done, but what I had learned through the entire ordeal. I realized that her betrayal, as cruel as it had been, had forced me to confront my own boundaries, my own self-respect, and my own capacity for resilience. Socially, I had shifted. Friends I had once overlooked became my support system, and I rekindled connections with people I had unintentionally pushed away in my obsession with the relationship. I even started mentoring a few younger professionals at work, not just teaching skills, but guiding them through personal challenges, sharing the subtle lessons I had learned about trust, discernment, and self-worth. It was ironic, really. My own suffering had prepared me to help others navigate their storms. One evening, sometime in late July 2020, I found myself scrolling through Instagram out of idle curiosity. Melissa's profile came up, a carefully curated feed of perfection. Photos of trips, dinners, and celebrations, but something had changed. Comments from mutual friends hinted at cracks in her carefully constructed world. Whispers about lies, broken promises, and inconsistencies were quietly surfacing. It was subtle, almost invisible, but undeniable. Karma, in its patient way, had begun to manifest. I felt a strange sense of closure scrolling through those posts, not joy or schadenfreude, but quiet acknowledgement. The woman who had humiliated me, who had tried to rewrite the story of my life to suit her own narrative, was now experiencing consequences without me having to lift a finger. Life had a way of balancing itself, I realized, and my role was never to orchestrate her downfall. It was simply to live. Authentically unapologetic ally. By the end of 2020, I had started dating again, cautiously at first, but with a sense of self-assuredness I had never possessed before. I no longer sought validation from someone else's affection. Instead, I sought connection built on honesty, respect, and mutual admiration. The contrast between my new relationships and the deception I had endured with Melissa was stark, almost painful in its clarity. But it reinforced the lessons I had learned. Boundaries matter, intuition matters, and self-worth is non-negotiable. Professionally, I thrived. The promotion I had earned months earlier was just the beginning. My projects gained recognition, my reputation grew, and I found a voice within my industry that I hadn't known existed. People looked up to me, respected me, and sought guidance from me, not because I had humiliated anyone else, but because I had endured, grown, and emerged stronger. That, in itself, was the ultimate reclamation of power. Looking back, the humiliation, the betrayal, and the heartbreak now seem like a different life, a prelude to something greater. I can still feel the sting when I recall the nights spent staring at her phone, the moments of disbelief at the party, the suffocating tension in the apartment, but those moments no longer define me. They are markers of growth, reminders that resilience is forged in fire, and that the pain of betrayal can be transformed into clarity, strength, and even wisdom. The final lesson crystallized one crisp autumn evening in October 2021. I was walking along the lakefront, the golden leaves crunching beneath my feet, the cool wind on my face, and I realized something profound. Life is not about revenge, nor is it about humiliation. It is about reclaiming your narrative, living with integrity, and allowing time and, sometimes karma to, restore balance in ways you cannot force. I smiled, a full, unguarded smile, because for the first time in years, I felt completely unburdened. Free, whole dot, and as I watched the sun dip behind the skyline, Casting its golden glow across the water, I felt a quiet gratitude not for the betrayal itself, but for the growth it had forced, the clarity it had revealed, and the strength I had discovered within myself. Melissa's choices no longer haunted me. They had been her story, her path. My story was different. I had survived. I had thrived. And I had learned that true power isn't about taking revenge, about taking back your life, one deliberate, unshakable step at a time. Even now, when I recount the story to close friends, I notice the subtle gasps, the nods of empathy, the quiet acknowledgement that what I endured was unimaginable. But I don't linger in the past anymore. I live in the present, aware of my own worth, confident in my own resilience, and certain that the universe has a way of balancing the scales, even when human hands cannot. Ultimately, the humiliation she inflicted didn't break MIT, revealed me. It showed me who I was capable of being when stripped of illusions, when forced to confront betrayal and rebuild from the ground up. And that, more than any act of revenge or public vindication,